Pleasure to be down here, guys, and to see some old faces as well. Faces that I've known for quite some period of time. How's that? Is that a better way to put it? Let me just turn that on so I've got some kind of idea where I'm at. So yeah, it's nice to be down here and to be invited to speak on the topic of sustainable tourism. It's something that I'm very passionate about and live and breathe on a daily basis. When you are not only employed in a certain sector but have your own business in that sector, you are forced to live and breathe it. It's absolutely rammed down your throat, but it's also just a responsible thing to do. We live in a day and age these days where, as a social conscience, it's just, some things just become the norm after a while. So it's not really a new subject matter, but there's various takes on what sustainable tourism can actually be. And then there's perspectives on what's sustainable tourism to a commercial operator, what's sustainable tourism to a person that lives in a remote town, what's sustainable tourism to nature, right? So it's various things to various people. And if you go on Google for a definition of it, you're going to find a whole bunch of different explanations. But if you can quantify it in your own brain, it's taking all of the elements of tourism and the natural environment, the built environment, the social impacts, the commercial impacts, and doing it in what is considered to be a responsible manner. But humans being humans, responsible to me is different to responsible to you, to responsible to you. It's a varying thing. I'll tell you a little bit of a story about where my background came from and how I got into tourism. Because when you start up a tourism venture from the ground up, you can absolutely apply all of the principles that mean something to you rather than inheriting something and then trying to inject them in there. So starting from scratch was beneficial. My tourism story started by backpacking around Europe when I was about 20 years old, buying a one-way, well, it wasn't a one-way ticket. I told Mum it was returned, but just to keep her on side and keep that bed in the car in the driveway without having to pay extra board. Like a lot of us did, you go away in those early formative years and you have a lot of experiences, you get runs on the board and experiences under your belt, and it kind of shapes you to what you want to achieve out of life and your perceptions on the world. The things that I always remember about travelling was I was 20 years old and I wanted to experience certain towns that I'd seen that were exciting, like Barcelona's, because the Olympics had been on not long previously and you heard all these ramblings and it was a hot spot to go and see. And so you get there and there's a ton of people because they've felt the same pull to that place as well. So it would be a very different experience to what it was if you were there in 9 months before the Olympics were on. And then when you get to a place like Europe, all of a sudden there's various other hotspots around Europe that are just coming on the map that are becoming notable for people to go to. So you go there thinking, all right, I'm going to get this experience. And then you get there and you're like, oh, there's already a ton of other people that got the same memo, right? So the experience now completely changes and the impact on that area can vary. So where the walking tour side of things came and the seed was planted for me was I grew up in a household full of brothers, and we played with guns and tanks and toys and read books about World War II and all this type of stuff. And so for me, growing up, Berlin was a place that had this magical pull to it as a very important epicenter of World War II. So I travelled as a 20-year-old thinking, right, I'm going to go there and I'm going to get this immersiveness into a place that means something to me through this history that I found really fascinating of the war. And then you get there and you're a bit naive and you go, oh, it was flattened. It was bombed. You know, there's nothing really there. There's half a cathedral, which I've done pretty well in trying to maintain. But you go to the urban environment, you're like, I'm not going to get what I wanted to get out of this experience on my own. And so in those days, you went to the gospel of tourism, which was called Lonely Planet. Okay. Now, in sustainable tourism, man, yeah, all of us going, now, do you have a Hotmail account? Yeah, you know, showing our age, yeah. It's still there somewhere sitting vacant, getting all this spam in it. And so you pull out the Lonely Planet and you go, what am I going to do in this town? And front and centre, one of the first things you could do in Berlin was the Berlin walking tour, which I did. There were versions of it, 2 hour, 4 hour and a whole day. I did the half day and went, wow, I got what I needed. I heard what I needed to hear. I found out what I needed to find out and were led to the places that physically aren't there anymore, but are still super important because the event happened there, the people were there, the decisions were made there. And just because the building isn't there anymore, it doesn't take away the significance of that site. It just isn't as visually appealing or that you would stumble upon. So I walked away from that finally getting that experience out of Berlin that I really, really desired. And that resonated with me somewhere. And I had no inclination to get into tourism at some point, but you take these little experiences along the way and they sit in there somewhere, and when the time's right and sliding doors and something converges, bang, this idea pops up. And for me, the idea popped up here just on 12 years ago when a friend of mine who's a co-founder of the business was visiting from the eastern states, and like most of us do when we have a visiting friend or relative, you show them around. And we did that. I was showing him around the city. It was a midweek night. If you remember Perth 12 years ago, it's a very different beast to what it is now. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. It's about this time of year, so it's winter, if you want to believe that. Beautiful, the lights are out, visually stunning. And here I am as a local, just pulling up those little bits of tidbits that I remembered from school or this or that or the other. And we stopped in the middle of Supreme Court Gardens and kind of looked around, and we both at the same time just went, ping, why aren't there people out walking right now, enjoying what we're enjoying right now? Okay. And the answer was, well, they don't know where to go, they don't know what to look for, there's this preconceived notion that there's no story or history, whatever it was, which we all know is absolute nonsense. But there was no conduit for a tourist or a visitor or whoever to actually engage. So our business started from that little ping light bulb moment, and then all of a sudden you went, oh, I remember that Berlin experience, I remember this, and then you sit down and you started to piece it all together. And then so from a sustainable tourism perspective, we could now put in all of the elements that we considered important. We made some very important decisions right from the get-go. We're not going to have any vehicles. So from a tourism perspective, if you're not a site, if you're not the Mint or the Bell Tower or this or that other, you generally need some form of transportation to get around. We just made a commitment right from the get-go, none, ever. It's not part of our business. And if you're all adult, you can figure out what type of implications a vehicle would have for sustainability and environmental impacts, etc. Bang, gone. So there's a big one taken straight out of there. So then you go, what can you actually do to offset walking if you're walking people around? Well, it's a pretty minimalistic impact to start with. So from that point of view, there's not a lot you can do from an environmental perspective of sustainability, but then on the business side of things, and the back of house, you certainly can. We made it straightforward. We're not going to deal with anyone that wants to send us paper invoices. Okay? People were sending it, said we're not going to deal with you unless you send us an email instead. We get no paper invoices and haven't for about a decade. Now, it's not going to save the planet, but it's something you can do, right? Just an absolute little thing. Our tours have evolved over time. Originally, the tours didn't involve any real elements of food or drink, and the main reason was there just wasn't the food and drink offerings in the city that there are now. As they started to develop, we wanted to include promotion of great local operators that do things like use local produce or are locally owned, or renovating an old heritage building, which in their business model is sustainable. So if we've got people, let's take them to the other people that are ticking the boxes and doing all the right things. So we partner up with venues that we know brew their beer locally, or source food from down the road at Gin Gin, or whatever it might be. And we've taken the lead on a few things where we've tried to collaborate with local producers or providers, where, say, a drink that you might get at a certain venue is not on the menu, nowhere else can get it, okay, and it's used. We went and found a distillery from up the coast, we went and found a winery from down south, we said, hey guys, why don't you work together? And they created this beautiful cocktail that doesn't exist on the menu, that you can only get on our tour, getting collaborations of 2 local producers that are trying to get their name up there as well. And so small group by small group, they are now exposed to a gin that they never would have known about, or a wine that they never would have known about. So next time they're thinking as a consumer, I'm having a dinner party, we need a bottle of wine. Well, now they're thinking, maybe I'll go buy that local provider. Now again, it's not going to change the world, but little by little by little, at least we're saying we're conscious of doing these types of things. So that's what we do. They're micro because of the level of industry that we're in, but it can become macro when you start connecting with the other people that are doing the things, and then you're all working together in that way. From a cultural perspective, our sustainable element of culture, and culture is different things. You go up to the Kimberley and you ask someone what a cultural tour is, it's straight down the line, it's an Aboriginal tour. Okay, that's just the term for it. Down here, or in the tourism sector as a whole, if you said cultural tourism, it means it's a broad, really, really broad thing. At the moment, we've just started engaging some Indigenous guides, but we're all white fellas. So from a cultural perspective and sustainability, it's not our stories to tell pre-1829. Okay, that's someone else's story to tell. That's not to say they're not important. They are vitally important that that information is shared, but it's not for us to tell. So what we do from a sustainability perspective is open the door to say there is all this element. Hey, here's what happens when white fellas jump on black fella land and things happen from here. You really want to know about this stuff. Here's where you can find it. Okay, and push them and direct them into another operator that you know does the right things. And then from a sustainability perspective, from expanding cultural understanding, you can do that. And so the goal at the end of the day between connecting all these things purely from a visitor's perspective in a tourism sector is you want a visitor to come to a destination, spend their time, spend their money, engage, have a great time. But ultimately the proof is in the pudding that when they go back home, they go, I had a good time. I want to tell people about what I did. They can remember what they did. They can regurgitate certain things and they become advocates for the destination. And in this day and age, it's just a no-brainer that local food, local produce, promoting the local industries, heritage spaces is, I don't want to use the term, but it is the term, on trend. But it shouldn't be on trend, it should just be the norm. Okay, so to take away a silly term, because it's an Instagram word, I guess, is on trend. So they're the things that we do locally. We also only engage local staff. We never employ backpackers or people that are transient through. You have to have some level of roots here. Okay, now Perth is a very interesting beast in that there's 2 million people here and only half of those were born here. So your pool of people that you might consider local is lower. So our terminology of what is local is maybe different to what other people might expect. If you have proven roots here, you've moved your life and you are set in Perth and you can prove to us in some capacity that this is where your life is, you're now considered a local. Okay, like I said, there's just a small population really of who to choose from that was born here. And that's fine because that also promotes the identity of Perth. Perth is a place where a lot of other people have come from, right from day one of a colony being formed. And so from a sustainability perspective, we can kind of capture that because you've got different market sectors in tourism, okay? In WA, the largest single market sector is what we call the VFR market. Does anyone know what that stands for? Jacinta? Yes, yes. Visiting friends and relatives, visiting friends and relatives. You think about it, there's 2 million people that are here, 1 million weren't born here. So essentially there's 1 million people that generally speaking every year have Auntie Pat coming to visit or their mate coming from South Africa, whatever. That's a lot of other people that are coming here because they know someone here. Okay, so you can use that to your favour in a tourism perspective like that. So we identify that they become a critical section of sustainability from a commercial perspective now. So we've looked at the cultural perspective, we've looked at all these elements, but we have to look at it from our business being able to make money from year to year so that I can get paid and put food on the table. So again, what is sustainable tourism? It's different things to the different people in the different parts of it. So we have very focused marketing campaigns to make sure, and this goes back to day one of the business where we learnt from a few mistakes because we came in greenhorn, had no experience in tourism and thought, well, I was a backpacker and I liked walking tours, therefore, that's who we're going to market towards. And then you find out later on backpackers have no money in their pocket, and if they do, they'd rather buy a jug of beer. They're spending their money in very different ways, or they're coming in just to go to the regional areas and spend time out in the bush, which is fantastic. So through a little bit of trial and error, you try your marketing sectors, but then we start to get a little bit of exposure through the local media, okay, which has become a very important part of our sustainable marketing campaign. But we didn't go out and seek it because we were doing something that was so against the grain in Perth, because at this time the headlines on the front of the Sunday Times, etc. So remember what the headlines were at the time? Yeah, there was a D word that was used as well. Dullsville was the word that was used, yeah. And that was like a watershed moment here because people took it and went, yeah, or people took it and said, no. The easiest thing to do is nothing. And there's a lot of people that lit a fire under people's bum and going, you know what, let's do something about that. Or from our perspective, we went, well, We don't believe that is the case. It's just there's stuff going on, but people don't know how to find it or where to get to it. So let's be a conduit to do it. So we use that as motivation. So we started speaking very positively about the destination. We started speaking very enthusiastically about it and also offering a service and a product that had never existed. So the media naturally get onto that and they want to expose things that are different. Got a little bit of local media and all of a sudden the phone started ringing off the hook with people that lived locally and wanted to engage. And we knew we were onto something when people from West Leederville were calling up and saying, I want to come do a walking tour. I live in West Leederville. I haven't been into the city for 10 years. 500 metres or 2 stops down the road. When something like that happens, you go, okay, we feel like we're actually onto something here. And ever since then, for a part of our business sustainability is we make sure that we engage with the local community to make sure we're front and centre, that they know that we're a responsible operator in these other sustainable things that we do, but underlying that we still offer a really, really good product. And that way the word of mouth recommendations and the visiting friends and relatives will continue to just kind of tick over the years. So that's been a really handy thing. And why that works really well for sustainability in WA, not just us, but the tourism sector as a whole in WA is not shrinking, okay? In some capacity it is. It's a huge footprint, like it's a massive state, but population-wise it's not shrinking. Okay, the population grew by 500,000 in the last 10 years, went up by 25% in the last 10 years. If you have a look at the forecasts of what it will be in 10 or 20 or 25 to 30 years, we're talking up to 3.5 million in the not too distant future. Now, where are all those people coming from? A lot will be born here, but a lot are also coming from some. So what does that mean to the visiting friends and relatives market? That's only going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And while other sectors grow, so that's a healthy position for. So the argument there is, if you were thinking about opening a tourism business in WA, is there sustainability to it? If you look at the numbers and show that the base numbers are only going to grow exponentially, well, I think the answer speaks for itself, that if you have the right model and the right product and the right service, yeah, it's a pretty healthy place. So, but where the state is getting smaller is sometimes it's the ability to go to these regional areas. Okay, now you're not going to make Kununurra come any closer. Okay, it's still going to be a long, long, long way away. But the world has gotten smaller because of social media influences. Okay, and there's desirability tourism. I saw an Instagram feed of someone at such and such a spot. That looks good. I want to go there. I want to make my friends jealous. I want to go somewhere that's very hard to get to. The final frontiers. I want to go to Antarctica. I want to go to places that are very, very hard to reach. And the Kimberley at the moment is hot. Globally, the Kimberley is absolutely a hot spot for marketing, for desirability, but it's still going to mean when you travel into Perth, you have to dedicate a lot of time and money, resources to go, and everyone's time poor, okay? So now you start having this influx of tourism to these remote areas, and they're in a healthy spot because of the isolation that they've had for forever and a day. They haven't been spoilt yet. So they're in a position now to go, who's coming? How will they come? What can we do to make sure that sites are not ruined? And one example, it's not the Kimberley, but in the Ningaloo, there's heavy regulations on how many people can go out and swim with a whale shark on any given day. Yeah. Okay, you go to some places in Thailand where Borneo and these areas that are just ridiculously beautiful reefs, but they didn't regulate how many people could go out, so the experience is subpar, and now they have to reverse that back and try and regulate the numbers before it's absolutely ruined. And you can see some areas where pop culture, I know we talked about Instagram a second ago, but some areas where pop culture becomes an influence is, remember the movie The Beach, the Leonardo? Remember, do you know what happened to that beach? Yeah. It's closed. Yeah, because who wouldn't want to go there? You saw the movie, right? Outside of the crazies that were living there, and then the lifestyle. Yeah, exactly. And so that was going to be another point, is in Mount Everest, there's certain accessibility that's been closed. They won't let you in from the Tibet side, but you can still go in from the Nepal side because it means you have to take a lot longer. So the only people that are going through there are the dedicated ones rather than the people that want to go, bucket list ticked, I've been to Everest. And so you can filter it out that way. Because yeah, there's a lot of people dying up there. Where do you put the rubbish? You have all these problems with it. So from a sustainable tourism perspective in WA, the fact we've been isolated and the fact that it's been hard to get to Perth or even the more remote, it works in your favour because you start from the bar and go, we can implement things to not ruin it, whether it's a whale shark or the burrup or whatever it is, you can actually get on top of it. And it also helps that we have, for the most part, stable, responsible government that recognise, hey, I've gone over. I thought I turned on silent. Generally speaking, responsible governments that identify these things. It's how they implement these policies will ultimately the proof in the pud, but they are there to do it. And there was one other example I came across, and these are, I'll wrap it up in just 1 second. The Mount Everest Base Camp, and one I came across when I was travelling in Borneo was, I wanted to go see orangutans in the wild before maybe there's no environment left for them. And so you fly over and you can see all the greenery down there, and you can see there's clearings like this. There's palm oil, right? Then you get on the ground and you go to an eco-village, and the money that you've spent goes to the local village, and it all goes to the right place. You're not going on a mass tourism thing. The money goes to where it needs to be, and you spend some time with locals. So guys, tell me, I eat pot noodles at home and I found that it had palm oil. You know, it's influenced me on a daily basis. And you speak to a local on the ground and they say, well, we're doing the best that we can. We're doing these responsible eco retreats to make sure you can see the orangutan, their natural environment. However, there's just not enough money and our families need to eat. So on the ground, there are people there that are doing everything they can for environmental sustainability, but from their local, cultural, environmental, putting food on their plate, they need an industry there as well. And so they've got this conflicting thing of like, we need that palm oil industry here, otherwise we'll all be in poverty, but we don't want our world to be dismantled. I don't know what the result of that is. That's just another example that you can't cater to all of it. But here in WA, the evidence is there that the sustainability is certainly there. It's a pretty healthy place to do tourism. The world is really interested in Western Australia at the moment. It's hard to get to. It's a biodiversity hotspot. It's different. And in the tourism world right now, people want different. And also people want away. People want to get away from crowds, and we have that. So I think we can do it really, really well here. So thank you very much. Cheers.